ni mo kí lóbìnrin, mo kí ọmọdé, bẹ́ẹ̀ ni mo kí àgbàlagbà, mo kí lọ́balọ́ba, mo kí lóyèlóyè, mo kí ládéládé ilẹ̀ Yorùbá. Adé apẹ́ lórí o, bàtà apẹ́ lẹ́sẹ̀ fún gbogbo ọba ilẹ̀ Yorùbá pátápátá. Mo súnmọ́ba níwọ̀n ẹgbẹ̀je, mo jìnnà sọ́ba níwọ̀n ẹgbẹ̀fà, nítorí pé àrọ́bà fífà yìí náà lọ́ba ń pa. Ebi ò sí nínú abáwọn bọ́ba o. Mo wá ṣe ládùúrà pé adé apẹ́ lórí, ìrùkẹ̀rẹ̀ apẹ́ lọ́wọ́, èjìgbọ̀ ọ̀lẹ̀kẹ̀ yóò pẹ́ lọ́rùn gbogbo ẹ̀yin ọba ilẹ̀ Yorùbá, gbogbo ẹ̀yin olólùfẹ́ mi káàkiri gbogbo Nàìjíríà. Mo mà kí yín. Ẹ̀yin olólùfẹ́ mi káàkiri gbogbo ilẹ̀ Áfíríkà, mo kẹ́yìn náà bákan náà. Gbogbo ẹ̀yin olólùfẹ́ mi káàkiri gbogbo àgbáyé, gbogbo yín ni mo kí o. Ètò yín, ètò wa, ètò kan, ètò Bàbá Gbàgede Ìmọ̀ TV, òun náà ló mà tó jáde lónìí. Ẹ jẹ́ kí n kọ́kọ́ fi àsìkò yìí máa bẹ̀ wá ná wípé ẹ má bínú, wípé ẹ ò rí mi. Kọ́ọ̀lù yẹn pọ̀ ju ìpè pọ̀ látijọ́ Jímọ̀ tí mo ti fi fídíò kan síta gbẹ̀yìn. Kì í kúkú ṣe bẹ́ẹ̀ o, kì í ṣẹjọ́ mi. Ṣé Yorùbá bọ̀ wọ́n ní tí ò bá sí nǹkan tó ṣẹ́ ìṣẹ́ kì í déédéé ṣẹ́. Ó kúkú nídìí. Ìdí ni pé tí ẹ bá wo ibi tá a wà yìí, ẹ rí pé ààyè ọ̀tọ̀ ni àti pé ìletò ọ̀tọ̀ ni. Ibi tá a wà yìí ni ààyè wa tí à ń pè ní permanent studio wa. Ìyẹn ni pé studio Bàbá Gbàgede Ìmọ̀ TV. Ṣé mò ń sọ fún wa látijọ́ yìí wípé ní agbára Olódùmarè a ti sọ ètò yìí di online TV. Ẹ sì máa jẹ̀gbádùn wa gidi dọ́ba. Eléyìí ni studio tuntun tí a wà báyìí. Láìpẹ́ a máa ṣí studio yìí lágbára Ọlọ́run ọba. A ti ń test run, ṣùgbọ́n lónìí ẹ rí pé ṣé àyè yàtọ̀ àti pé ń tá a kó mọ́ra ọ̀tọ̀ọ̀tọ̀ ni. Láìpẹ́ yìí a máa tó open studio yìí pẹ̀lú ògo Ọlọ́run. Ẹ má bínú, gbogbo wàhálà equipment ti studio àti gbogbo wàhálà ló fà á tí ẹ ò fi rí mi, tí mi ò fi lè ráyè ṣe fídíò. Látàárọ̀ tí n bá ti wọnú studio báyìí, ó dẹ̀ dálẹ́ ká tó ṣe tán. Kò wá sáyè fún mi láti kó ìròyìn tí mo fẹ́ wá sọ fún yín jọ. Mi ò dẹ̀ fẹ́ parọ́. Ìdí rèé tí ẹ ò fi rí mi. Lọ́wọ́lọ́wọ́ bá ti ṣe ń sọ̀rọ̀ yìí, ẹ jẹ́ kí n máa fi eléyìí ṣe ìṣíde lónìí. Lọ́wọ́lọ́wọ́ bá ti ṣe ń sọ̀rọ̀ yìí, ìwọ́de wọ́ọ́rọ́wọ́ tó ń lọ ní táwọn Niners tí wọ́n organize tó ń lọ lọ́wọ́ ọlọ́jọ́ 6 àbọ̀lọ́jọ́ 7 tí wọ́n pè ní 1 million march. Ó ti bẹ̀rẹ̀ látàná tí ṣe ọjọ́ 14. Fídíò tẹ́ ń wò yìí ó ní fídíò ọjọ́ 15 15/9/2021. Ìyẹn ni pé ọjọ́ Wednesday 15/9/2021 òun náà là ń ṣe fídíò èní. Èní ló di ọjọ́ kejì tí wọ́n bẹ̀rẹ̀ ìwọ́de yìí. Èní ló di ọjọ́ kejì tí wọ́n bẹ̀rẹ̀ ìwọ́de yìí. Àwa náà a bá wọn láìpẹ́ yìí ni mo ju fídíò wọn síta wípé kí ojú wò ó. A tún wá mójú lọ, a wò díẹ̀ nínú àwọn tí wọ́n ṣe lọ́hùn-ún. Kí ni bàbá wa Bánjí Akíntóyè sọ nípa ìwọ́de yìí? Kí ni wọ́n sọ nípa ẹ̀? Torí àwọn náà ṣàìmá sọ̀rọ̀. Kí ni wọ́n sọ nípa ẹ̀? Àti wípé báwo lọ̀hún ṣe rí? Mo fẹ́ kájọ mójú débẹ̀ káwa náà wo kí ni nǹkan tí wọ́n ṣe ní ráńpẹ́. Ṣùgbọ́n díndí fídíò yìí gangan mo ti post ẹ̀ síwájú kí n tó máa ṣe fídíò eléyìí. Ó yá, ẹ bá mi ká lọ, mò ń bọ̀.
I welcome you all, representatives of the peoples of the South and Middle Belt of Nigeria, the indigenous peoples of Nigeria representing 75% of the population and land area of Nigeria. We are here to bring before the world the disaster that is developing in Nigeria and to ask the United Nations as the voice of the world to intervene immediately to stop the disaster that is developing, the killing of people, the mass killing of people, and the destruction of property and lives, and the introduction into the stream of Al-Qaeda and ISIS from outside Nigeria. I cannot say more because of the technological problems, the network problems. But you all know what I'm saying. I welcome you all. We ask the United Nations to organize a referendum so we can exercise our right to choose whether to continue to live with these people or not. Thank you all. Welcome. And may God give us the victory that we seek. We shall overcome.
Write my number down. Or take the picture. That's my name. That's my number. Sorry. City will let you out. City will let you out.
Maryland.
Oh, okay. And she New Yorker. Let's say I want New Yorker. We are Brooklyn àbí Bronx. Tẹ́ bá sọ pé oúnjẹ gidi àbí ẹ bá dẹ̀ tún dé 42nd Avenue. Ṣé ẹ̀mí ní Nàìjíríà food ọ̀sán? Ọ̀nà yẹn á jì. Àwọn ará ní ok ẹ mọ̀ pẹ̀fú ẹ̀lẹ̀ tó máa ń ṣe Yorùbá program yẹn tó máa ń ṣe Yorùbá play one of Yorùbá actors ni bá rí sí màá pọ̀ ní Brooklyn wa ó lè ṣàlàyé fún yín bẹ́tà ọ̀ wá sọ ní kẹ́lẹ́ lọ.
tó ẹ káàbọ̀ padà eré là ń pè é ṣé Yorùbá bọ̀ wọ́n ní à ń pè ní àáró à ń pè ní ọ̀wẹ̀ ó ní àáró nínú díẹ̀ Yorùbá nation máa ń ṣe bẹ́ẹ̀ ó máa ń dodidi bọ̀ láìpẹ́ láì jìnnà á mọ ibi tí ọ̀rọ̀ Yorùbá kù sí lórí Yorùbá nation náà ni mo ṣe wà. Ìbànújẹ́ lélẹ́yìí jẹ́ fún mi láti fẹ́ sọ ọ̀rọ̀ yìí ṣùgbọ́n wọ́n sọ ọ́ nítorí pé Yorùbá ní àlá kan kì í ba ọmọ lẹ́rù àlá kì í sì bani lẹ́rù títí kí a má lè rọ̀ òun náà ni mo ṣe fẹ́ sọ tí mo fẹ́ sọ yìí. n tó yà mí lẹ́nu ni pé bí a ti ṣe ń jẹ èkuru kó tọ́ láwo àwọn lọ́balọ́ba ilẹ̀ Yorùbá kan mà tó sì ń gbọ́wọ́ ẹ̀ sáwò bí àwọn èèyàn bí wọ́n ti ń kú lọ́tún lósì nílẹ̀ Yorùbá ǹjẹ́ jẹ́ mọ̀ pé a sì rápẹrẹ pé ó ń dùn máwọn ọba kan nínú a sì rápẹrẹ pé àwọn ọba kan wà tó jẹ́ pé kò bí wọn nínú rárá bí àwọn Fúlàní ti ṣe ń pa Yorùbá ní gbèjìgbẹ̀jọ. Ìdí rèé tí mo fi fẹ́ sọ ọ̀rọ̀ tí mo fẹ́ sọ yìí nítorí pé àwọn ọba yìí wọ́n mà sọ̀rọ̀ wọ́n sọ̀rọ̀ wípé ó tẹ́ àwọn lọ́rùn o bí Nàìjíríà ká wà ní ìṣọ̀kan wọ́n ló tẹ́ àwọn lọ́rùn kí Nàìjíríà wà ní ìṣọ̀kan wọ́n ló tẹ́ àwọn lọ́rùn pé kí Nàìjíríà má pé wọ́n ní kí ọmọ Yorùbá wọ́n ní kí wọ́n sinmi ẹ̀dọ̀ pàápàá jùlọ gbogbo ẹ̀yin tẹ́ ń pariwo Yorùbá nation wọ́n ní kẹ́ sinmi ẹ̀dọ̀ nítorí pé wọ́n ní ọmọ rẹ̀ kan kò sí nínú ìbọn wọ́n lèèyàn kan kì í gbọ́ dáadáa lẹ́nu ìbọn wọ́n ní gbogbo àwọn tí wọ́n jẹ́ àjìjàǹgbara yìí kódà wọ́n ní gbogbo wọn pátápátá ló jẹ́ pé wọn ò ṣe dáadáa. ìkànnù wọn tiẹ̀ sọ wípé àwọn ẹni tá à ń sọ yìí o, àwọn àjìjàǹgbara yìí àbí àwọn tí wọ́n ń béèrè fún orílẹ̀-èdè Yorùbá, wọ́n ní wọn ò sọ tó ń sọ yìí torí Yorùbá o, ẹ jẹ́ sọ lóyìnbó kó lè tètè yé wa. wọ́n ní wọn ò rẹpísẹ́ǹtì Yorùbá. èyí táwọn ọba yìí sọ̀rọ̀ bí òfin bí ò parọ́ o, mò ń kà fún wa. ọba kan wá wà nú àwọn ọba yìí, ó yà mí lẹ́nu torí pé ní ìgbà kan wọ́n ti fi ẹ̀sùn kan bàbá rí, bàbá sì sọ pé rárá ọ̀rọ̀ yẹn ò rí bẹ́ẹ̀. ó wá yà mí lẹ́nu pé Olúbàdàn tìlú Ìbàdàn, bàbá àwọn náà wọ́n mà tó dárúkọ wọn sí àwọn ọba tí wọ́n sọ ọ̀rọ̀ yìí wípé kò sí tó ń jẹ́ Yorùbá nation. àwọn ọjọ́ kan ni wọ́n lọ ṣe bàbá kẹ́ẹ̀pẹ́ ń bẹ̀rù sí àwọn ọba kọ̀ọ̀kan nílẹ̀ Yorùbá. àjọ náà máa jẹ́ Yorùbá Appraisal Forum. àwọn àjọ yìí ni wọ́n lọ ṣe bàbá kẹ́ẹ̀pẹ́ sí àwọn ọba kọ̀ọ̀kan ní ilẹ̀ Yorùbá, tí oníkálùkù sì sọ tójú rẹ̀ tó lórí tàbí èrò ọkàn tiẹ̀ lórí ọ̀rọ̀ Yorùbá nation. ṣe rí ohun tí mo fẹ́ ṣe yìí, ó wù mí kí n ka tó ní kálukú sọ, ó wù mí kí n ka tí ọba kọ̀ọ̀kan sọ, kó bá má jẹ́ wípé mò ń mọ̀mú lómùú. mi ò fẹ́ sọ ní tọ́ba kan ò sọ. àwọn ọba tí wọ́n wà nínú ọ̀rọ̀ yìí, àwọn náà rèé: Olúbàdàn tìlú Ìbàdàn ní ìpínlẹ̀ Ọ̀yọ́, ọba Sọ́líù Adétúnjì. Ṣọ̀ún tìlú Ògbómọ̀ṣọ́ lọ́yọ̀ọ́ kan náà, ọba Jímọ̀ Oyèwùnmí Àjàgùngbadé kẹta. Olọ́wọ̀ tìlú Ọ̀wọ̀ ní Ondo State, ọba Ajíbádé Gbadégẹṣin. Ògúnòyè kẹta. bákan náà ni Olúwo tìlú Ìwó ní ìpínlẹ̀ Ọ̀ṣun, ọba Abdulrasheed Adéwálé Àkànbí. Onísán ti ìlú Ìsán Èkìtì nípínlẹ̀ Èkìtì, ọba Gabriel Adéjùwọ̀n Adétìlà. Olú ti Mọ́lọ́kọ Aṣípa Ìgbórè Abẹ́òkúta ní ìpínlẹ̀ Ògùn, ọba Nureni Nasiru Adésínà. àti ọba Elémùrè tìlú Èmùrè Èkìtì ní ìpínlẹ̀ Èkìtì, ọba Emmanuel Adébọ̀wálé Adébáyọ̀. àwọn ọba yìí ni wọ́n papọ̀ o nígbà tí àwọn Yorùbá Appraisal Forum tí wọ́n lè ṣe bàbá kẹ́ẹ̀pẹ́ sẹ́nìkọ̀ọ̀kan wọn ní ààfin wọn. òun náà ni àwọn ọba yìí ti sọ ọ̀rọ̀ yìí lọ́tọ̀ọ̀tọ̀ láì ṣe pé wọ́n ríra wọn, ṣùgbọ́n wọ́n sọ ohun tó wà lẹ́mìí wọn. ohun tí Olúbàdàn sọ òun náà rèé: Olúbàdàn sọ pé inú àwọn dùn gidi o fún wíwá tí àwọn Yorùbá ẹgbẹ́ yìí tí àwọn àjọ yìí tí wọ́n wá kí àwọn o. wọ́n sì sọ pé àwọn fẹ́ fi àsìkò yìí rọ gbogbo àwọn ọ̀dọ́ àti gbogbo àwọn tí wọ́n ń ṣe àjìjàgbara nílẹ̀ Yorùbá pé kí wọ́n ó sinmi ẹ̀dọ̀ o, wípé ọ̀nà mẹ́fà òun náà ni a pín Nàìjíríà sí ní ẹkùn òjẹkùn. ẹkùn àkọ́kọ́ náà ni ẹkùn àríwá tí a mọ̀ sí Northern Zone. bákan náà ni ẹkùn ti ilẹ̀ Yorùbá tí a mọ̀ sí Southern Zone, ní South West, South South, South East, North East, North Central. wọ́n ní àwọn ọ̀nà mẹ́fà tí a pín ilẹ̀ Yorùbá, tá a pín ìlú Nàìjíríà sí rèé. wọ́n wá ní ṣùgbọ́n o, tí wọ́n bá àwọn tí wọ́n láwọn fẹ́ pín yìí, wọ́n ní tí wọ́n bá tún di pé wọ́n ń ṣe báyìí lọ, wọ́n ní àwa gan la máa fìdí rẹmi o. wọ́n ní Yorùbá gan ló máa fìdí rẹmi nítorí pé wọ́n ní àwọn aráabí yìí wọ́n pọ̀ jù wá lọ. ìyẹn ni pé àwọn ará àríwá wọ́n ní wọ́n pọ̀ jù wá lọ. wọ́n nítorí ẹ̀ àwọn wá fi àsìkò yìí rọ gbogbo àwọn tí wọ́n fẹ́ sọ pé kí Yorùbá ó dá dúró. wọ́n láwọn fàsìkò yìí rọ̀ wọ́n o wípé kí wọ́n ṣe sùúrù kí wọ́n sì mẹ̀dọ̀. ní ti Ṣọ̀ún Ògbómọ̀ṣọ́ tí wọ́n ọba ọládùn ní oyèwùnmí àjàgùngbadé kẹta. Àwọn tí wọ́n sọ pé àwọn ti ẹ̀ ṣèkìlọ̀ ni fún gbogbo àwọn ajìjàgbara pátápátá. Ẹ jẹ́ n kà bí wọ́n ti kọ́ gan kẹ́ gbọ́. He warned those agitating for a separate Yoruba nation to perish the thought, saying the Yoruba race has nothing to benefit from seceding from a united Nigeria. Wọ́n ní àwọn kìlọ̀, àwọn ṣe ìkìlọ̀ fún gbogbo àwọn tí wọ́n sọ pé àwọn fẹ́ jìjàgbara lẹ̀ Yorùbá wípé kí wọ́n rè sí mẹ̀dọ̀ pé torí pé kò sí dáadáa kan tí wọ́n fẹ́ rí gbà nínú kí wọ́n láwọn fẹ́ pín nínú ìparapọ̀ ilẹ̀ Nàìjíríà tó papọ̀ United Nigeria. Ọba Oyèwùnmí wọ́n tún sọ pé gbogbo àwọn ọ̀dọ́ bókànràn kí wọ́n sọ pé bókànràn kí wọ́n máa jìjàgbara níṣe ni kí wọ́n rèé fi orúkọ sílẹ̀ o fún ìdìbò 2023 tó ń bọ̀ kí wọ́n sì rí i pé àwọn dìbò. Àwọn díẹ̀ rí lára nǹkan tí àwọn ọba yìí tí wọ́n sọ díẹ̀ rí lára àwọn nǹkan tí àwọn ọba yìí tí wọ́n sọ wípé kí àwọn ajìjàgbara láti gba ilẹ̀ Yorùbá pé kí wọ́n sinmi ẹ̀dọ̀. Ẹ gbọ́ ìkílẹ̀ yìí rò sí èmi ò sínú abá wọn bọ̀bà àmọ́ táwọn ọba yìí sọ ṣé ó tọ́ àbí kò tọ́ mo fẹ́ gbọ́ nínú kọ́mẹ́ǹtì yín. Kì í wá ṣàwọn nìkan o, kì í ṣe àwọn nìkan. Olúfẹ́mi Gbajabiamila tí a mọ̀ sí spíkà ilé ìgbìmọ̀ asòfin kékeré tí a ń pè ní Federal House of Representatives ní Àbújá, àwọn náà tún sọ̀kan náà lónìí o ní ìgbà tí wọ́n ń ṣíde ìwọlé àwọn spíkà àwọn House of Reps ní Àbújá. Nígbà tí Gbajabiamila máa sọ̀rọ̀, ó níṣẹ́ ní gbogbo àwọn tí wọ́n sọ pé àwọn ń jìjàgbara fún Yorùbá nation, ó ní gbogbo wọn, ó ní wọn ò yàtọ̀ sí Boko Haram. Òun tiẹ̀ dídì pé wọ́n Boko Haram gan ni. Ẹ̀kọ́ tí ń fojú mímu hàn, ẹ̀kọ́ tí ń fojú mímu hàn pé púpọ̀ nínú ọmọ Yorùbá tí wọ́n jẹ́ olórí nínú wọn ò dùn sí tó ń ṣẹlẹ̀ yìí. Kí dẹ̀ ló fà á inú wọn ò lè dùn sí? Ìdí ni wípé gbogbo ìgbà téèyàn bá ti jẹ́ alájẹbánu tó ti rí àjẹbánu jẹ níbìkan, wọn ò ní fẹ́ kí bẹ̀rù dúró. Ṣé wọ́n kú ti mọ̀ pé gbàtẹ́ bá gba Yorùbá nation àkọ́kọ́ náà bẹ́ẹ̀ fàwọn ṣo lórí ní jẹ́ káwọn rówó kó jẹ bí nǹkan ṣe lọ́wọ́ báyìí. Ìtẹ̀mí rò ń tèmi nìyẹn o, mo fẹ́ gbọ́ kílẹ̀ yìí náà rò sí. Ṣùgbọ́n ó jẹ́ ìyàlẹ́nu fún mi pé a lè rí ọmọ Yorùbá kan tó lè gbójú sọ́hùn níbi ìpanirun tí àwọn Fúlàní yìí ṣe, ká tún máa wá tako àwọn tí wọ́n ń ṣe Yorùbá nation agitation. Tó Elédùmarè ọba òkè, ọ̀rọ̀ náà di ọwọ́ Ọlọ́run. Bákan náà ni pé àwọn kan ti pè àwọn tí wọ́n jẹ́ Yorùbá nation agitators wípé kí ìjọba o kó fún àwọn náà, kó fún wọn ní amnesty bíi tí wọ́n fún àwọn bandits. Wọ́n ní kí ìjọba Nàìjíríà kó fún àwọn tí wọ́n tẹ̀lé Ìgbòho tí wọ́n gbé pamọ́ àti àwọn tí wọ́n ṣe IPOB, wọ́n ní kó fáwọn náà l'amnesty pé n tó bá ti mú ìjọba fún àwọn Boko Haram l'amnesty wọ́n ló di dandan kí wọ́n fún àwọn Yorùbá agitators àti àwọn IPOB kí wọ́n fáwọn náà ní amnesty. Láìpẹ́ yìí ni wọ́n rí àwọn agbénipa ni wọ́n gbé àwọn márùn kan tẹ́ bá gbàgbé ní Ondo State ní ìpínlẹ̀ Ondo, tá a sì sọ pé àwọn tí wọ́n gbé yìí àwọn 9 jàre, àwọn 9 yìí sì ni àwọn Àmọ̀tẹ́kùn, àjọ Àmọ̀tẹ́kùn ni wọ́n gbà kalẹ̀. Gbogbo àwọn 9 yìí lágbára Ọlọ́run wọ́n ti dé ọ̀dọ̀ àwọn ẹbí wọn, ṣùgbọ́n kí wọ́n tó lọ wọ́n mà bí wọ́n lè rí béèrè kí lójú wọn rí lọ́dọ̀ àwọn Fúlàní àgbénipa kó tó di pé àwọn Àmọ̀tẹ́kùn wọ́n gbà wọ́n kalẹ̀ lọ́wọ́ Fúlàní àgbénipa. Ẹ jẹ́ ká wo bí iṣu ṣe bẹ́ àti bí iṣu ṣe kú àti bọ́bẹ̀ ṣe bẹ́, kí lójú àwọn ẹni rí lọ́dọ̀ Fúlàní àgbénipa. Mò ń padà bọ̀.
It was a long walk to freedom for the 3 remaining kidnapped victims of an 18-passenger bus traveling to Lagos on Monday. 12 of them were abducted in Ifira-Akoko area of Ondo State. Operatives of the State Security Network, codenamed Amotekun Corps, had earlier rescued 9 of the 12 travelers. The joy of these rescue victims knew no bounds as they unite with their family members. They narrated their ordeal in the hands of their abductors.
To go, they collected our phone. That was how the journey started into the bush and all that. Like that particular night, we walked like 2.5 hours, 3 hours non-stop before we could make the first stop rather, to rest a bit. Then we continued the journey further into the bush.
I'm from this bus from Abuja. I joined them from Lokoja. As we don't enter this below village, the road not too good like that.
Fully, and like from that spot, they say I should continue to give them to follow their instruction is always very rigid. You must not talk, you must not ask questions. Anytime they ask you to move, you must move. At the time I have to leave that man when they say I should report at Akungba, I said, okay, I'm going to Akungba. They say, okay, they say I should go.
Officials of the Amotekun Corps said the victims were rescued in the forest. The Amotekun commander in the state stressed that his men are on the trail of the abductors.
We were able to secure the release of the first 9. Our operatives still continued in the forest, and we were combing the forest. You agree with me that it's so massive because the same forest that extends to parts of Kogi. From the distress calls that we received, the gunshots of the kidnappers actually attracted our men, and that was why we were able to get there on time. So we are going to continue the patrol and some other security strategies that we won't tell you now.
Operatives of the Amotekun Corps believe that synergy with other security agencies will go a long way in tackling criminal activities.
Ẹ káàbọ̀ padà, Yorùbá ní ẹni orí yọ wọn ló dìlé o. Èyí táwọn mara àtọ́jú wọn rí lọ́dọ̀ Fúlàní agbénipa, òun náà lẹ mà ń gbọ́ yìí, òun náà lẹ wò tán yìí. Mo wá ṣe ládùúrà pé gbogbo ojú tí ń wò mí ìyá títí tó ń gbọ́ mi ní agbára Olódùmarè ọba òkè. Irú ò ní tọ́ sí wa o, a ò ní bọ́ sọ́wọ́ Fúlàní pẹ̀lú ògo Olódùmarè. Tó ìlú Nàìjíríà wọ́n láà tún ti fẹ́ yáwó. Wọ́n níjọba Nàìjíríà tún ti fẹ́ yáwó o. Wọ́n ti gbé bíìlì tán fi request fowó ní àtìlẹ̀ òkèèrè, wọ́n ti gbé lọ sí Senate. Àmọ́ bí mo ti ń bá yín sọ̀rọ̀ yìí, àwọn Senate mà ti buwọ́ lù. Wọ́n fẹ́ yá $4 billion kan, wọ́n sì tún fẹ́ yá 710 million pounds ni wọ́n tún fẹ́ yá sí. Ìta àti yá tẹ́lẹ̀ wà ń bẹ̀ o. Ètò tàtẹ́bí tá à ń ṣe ládùúrà ni pé ọlọ́ba jẹ́ kí ìjọba Nàìjíríà kó fi gbogbo àwọn ọmọ Nàìjíríà yàwó tán ọ̀dọ́ kó tó rí bẹ́ẹ̀ o pẹ̀lú ògo Ọlọ́run. Oníkálukú àti dọ́nù ìyá ẹ̀gbẹ́ Yorùbá ó ti máa jẹ́lẹ̀ Yorùbá wọn pẹ̀lú ògo Ọlọ́run. Àmọ́ ìjọba wọn tún ti fẹ́ yá owó míì. Nítẹ̀mí wá béèrè nípa àwọn owó ìgan kí náà fi wọ́n ṣe. Tí kì bá ṣe pé ṣe làwọn èèyàn kúkú ń kó wọn ná. Wọ́n ń kó wọn ná nìyí. Mo kọ́kọ́ fẹ́ sáré ẹ jẹ́ ká kọ́ wo fídíò bí tí Senate ti àpúrúfù owó tí wọ́n fẹ́ gbà yìí lẹ́sẹ̀kẹsẹ̀ ni wọ́n ti buwọ́ lù pé kí wọ́n tún lọ gba owó tùlùtùlù míì wá. Nàìjíríà tó ẹ jẹ́ ká kọ́kọ́ wo fídíò yẹn. Tá a bá wá padà dé lẹ́yìn ẹ̀, mo fẹ́ fi àwọn àpẹẹrẹ tí wọ́n ń fowó yìí ṣe nígbà tí ẹnìkan ṣoṣo tó dóhun nìkan ló máa kọ́ estate tó máa tó bíi ẹjẹ́ àwọ̀ estate yẹn nígbà bá wo fídíò náà ẹ̀mẹ̀nì tí mò ń wí àti gbogbo bí wọ́n ṣe ń ṣe owó báwọn olóṣèlú ṣe ń ṣe owó wa káàkiri ẹlòmíì gbé pamọ́ ẹlòmíì mò ń bọ̀
And at the upper legislative chamber, the president of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, received a letter from President Muhammadu Buhari seeking approval to borrow the sum of $4 billion and 710 million euros. In the letter, President Buhari explained that owing to emerging needs, there's a need to raise more funds for some critical projects. This is not the first time President Buhari is writing to the National Assembly to request approval for external loans this year. In May, he requested the sum of 2.343 trillion naira, which according to him was meant to part finance the budget deficit of 5.602 trillion naira in the 2021 budget.
Senator, addendum to the request for the Senate's concurrent approval of multilateral fund projects under the 2018-2021 federal government external borrowing plan, a right in respect of the above subject, and to submit the attached addendum to the proposed 2018-2021 federal government external borrowing rolling plan for the consideration and concurrent approval of the Senate for same to become effective. The distinguished Senate President may wish to recall that I earlier transmitted a request on the proposed 2018-2020 federal government external borrowing plan for the concurrent approval of the Senate in May 2021. The projects listed in the addendum to the 2018-2021 federal government external borrowing plan are to be financed through sovereign loans from the World Bank, French Development Agency, China Exim Bank, International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, Credit Suisse Group, and Standard Chartered China Export and Credit in this total sum of USD, American dollars, $4,476,863 plus euro 710 million and grant component of USD 125 million dollars.
This morning, we're going to be asking our panelists whom we have in the studio. Mr. Wale Oluwade is the CEO of Growth Masters Consultant. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you, Mokwe.
And we also have Professor Ken Ife, who is an economist. You're also welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning. Well, we're hearing now $4 billion is what the federal government is asking for, and we understand that our loan portfolio stands at about 33 trillion naira, or $87.239 billion. And analysts in general worried because much as we've been told that is a debt to GDP ratio looks fine, we know that our debt to revenue ratio is quite worrying. When you heard this loan request from the president, what were your first thoughts? Let's start with you, Prof.
Well, if I may, I just had a little chat with my colleague, Wale. For the benefit of our viewers, it's good to set out what the key parameters are on the legal side, on financial ratios, and then also on socio-economic, so that we are on the same page when we begin to argue, because this is a highly contentious issue. On the legal side, the Constitution says anything to do with borrowing has to be on the exclusive list. So we are all clear where it belongs. Then the second one is that there is a law that governs borrowing, which is Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007. And then it does say borrowing, it doesn't say external or domestic, any borrowing has to be for capital expenditure and human resource development. It has to be long-term, it has to be on concessionary terms. And then it also expects an analysis, what they call benefit ratio analysis, cost-benefit analysis, and as part of this, so as part of the due diligence. Then you come to the financial ratio. The only one that the FRA 2007 set was fiscal deficit to GDP at 3%. We know we are at 3.6%. We know that the Finance Act is sorting that out, and then we know that the FRA 2007 is up for renewal. They're amending it right now. But it also meets, the law actually says within 90 days of passing it, that the president should, on the advice of the minister and with the approval of the National Assembly, set the ratios, which means debt to GDP ratio is not set. The debt service to revenue ratio is not set, and then many other ratios. So then, it has to be, and it hasn't.
Prof, just before you go into the technicalities of this, what I want you to quickly answer was when you saw that when you saw the Senate President, I don't know how you saw it, maybe you saw it on the news or you heard it over the radio, what were your immediate thoughts? That's what I wanted to know.
For me, it is not unexpected. And that's why I'm giving you the background.
It didn't come
so
as
that
a
you can
surprise
understand.
to you?
No, it doesn't. Because
Okay.
until you understand where I'm coming from,
yes, are you expecting
my
it to
reaction is
come?
going to be different because I have basis for my reaction. So it doesn't come to me as a surprise.
So you expected
Because let me
it.
tell you why it doesn't come as a surprise to me.
No, Prof, I'm trying to establish that you expected it first.
Oh yeah, it's not the end. There's going to be more.
Okay. But
And
we're going to expect, we should expect more.
oh, of course.
Okay.
But one thing you have to bear in mind is that in 2005, we were owing about $30 billion. 40% of that money was due to penalties and all kinds of infractions. But here, for 6 years, the government has been paying. It hasn't defaulted. And when you don't default, financial people will tell you, bankers will tell you, as long as you are keeping a clean slate and you are not defaulting, and then you are a resource-rich country, and, you know, they just keep that. Is one person is in charge of just lending. When you come to debt issues, you know, there's another department that deals with it. So they just keep lending. That's why you have so many people ready to lend the money. So many, you've seen the list of the people who are prepared to lend, World Bank, they're all ready to lend because they have confidence that is a resource-rich economy. They are not defaulted. So when they input your data on the computer, it says, go ahead and lend, and they keep lending. So it doesn't worry me that much. But there are areas that worry me, which is the ability to repay the money. And then the ratios, you look at the ratios, they're not very pleasant. But there are concrete action that the government is taking to actually give us more confidence. So we'll come into all that detail.
And I think that's a detail that is important to us.
Okay.
So we might as well get to it.
All right. Now, the government revenue to GDP is 6 to 8%. The average is 18%. We are the lowest in Africa. ECOWAS macroeconomic convergence criteria says 20%.
We've since established
so
that.
we should be doing 3 times more in
Prof,
revenue.
but
we are moving because the PIB or PIA now that was signed, you saw the inland revenue say, oh, we're going to get towards our revenue 10 trillion, more than 10 trillion next year. Isn't that a movement that we're now going to expect double that revenue? Then you've seen actions being taken, Presidential Order 007, trying to get companies to get involved in infrastructure around them. Like you see Dangote and Bu are all using up to 50% of their revenue to do work to ensure that we are doing what needs to be done to make them more able to grow and then also pay more tax. Then you've seen the infrastructure company that is already capitalized with 1 trillion going out now to 15 trillion and is all in Naira, to now be able to take away all of this headache. The headache is infrastructure investment. Nigeria's stock of infrastructure is only 35% of our GDP. South Africa is 80%. Many countries are over 100%. So the deficit is there. The requirement, COVID is an existential problem. People were dying. So government has to borrow if it doesn't have the money. And in investment, when you want to invest in anything, you have to look for your saving. We don't have the saving, so you have to borrow.
Well, I can see Mr. Oluwade twitching almost to say something. I'm going to let him intervene on this matter when we come back from this break. We're talking about the economy now. This is as the president is seeking another $4 billion loan request, making it to the National Assembly and seeking their approval there. We still have in our studios this morning Mr. Wale Oluwade and Professor Ken Ife, who are intervening on the matter. Just to quickly mention that this is also happening as a National Bureau of Statistics, you might have seen it scrolling there, has released the inflation report. They say it has tapered by about 0.37% to 17.01%. It does look like inflation came down in the month of August. Well, let me quickly take your own intervention now. when you did see that request, that loan request by the president to the National Assembly, first thing as they resumed yesterday. I don't know, were you worried, or did you think that, well, we need to do this in order to make progress?
Thank you, Mankwe. Yeah, I was worried, you know, and while I understand the need for us to borrow to develop infrastructure, because we have a huge infrastructure deficit, you know, but I disagree with the federal government on the areas of investment of these borrowed funds. That's what gives me worries, you know. Now, it also speaks to the issue of what is a definition of an asset for a nation. Are assets roads and bridges and rails and all of that, or are assets the human beings? You know, used to the multilateral institutions, World Bank, IMF, they used to rate nations basically on GDP, you know, solely. But later on they realized that GDP isn't a fair or accurate assessment of the strength or the growth or the health of a nation. So they now came up with the issue of human development indices. You know, so let me use the analogy of a family man, you know, who has money and says, because I'm under pressure constantly from landlord, you know, to pay rent, I need to build a house. And so neglect, you know, to fund the education of his children, saying they should wait. When I finish building this house, you guys will go to school. But then the house took 6, 7, 8 years, you know, to complete. For 8 years, the kids didn't go to school, you know. Now, he's built this house. The kids have grown with no education, with no skills. What are they going to do? From the part of the country where I come from, a father who does that, the Yorubas will say, those kids are going to turn around and sell off those assets. Now, there are risks and there are implications for what the federal government is doing. What are the risks? Huge cost, interest cost, huge, you know, because what took us to the debt trap that we got into earlier on, that President Obasanjo wiped off, we're not just the loan stock itself, but accumulated, you know, interest that we're unable to pay. We're finding our way back there now, because don't forget, Maokwe, the basis of our ability to repay this loan is purely on one economic activity, which is crude oil. And the prices of the crude oil keeps fluctuating. We have no control over it. Another risk is that when you keep borrowing to fund infrastructure, you starve other key, you know, sectors of funds, human development, meaning education, healthcare, housing, and all whatnot. And thirdly, when you do this also, you starve funds that is needed to eradicate poverty. I mean, I could go on, not to also mention the fact that if you borrow to fund infrastructure, is governments, you know, do they have the skills to actually build, maintain, and operate different infrastructure rather than using alternative avenues? Now, in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, thereabouts, I've watched you almost every other day, every other week, interview National Association of Residents of Doctors, Johesu or ASU. Why are they going on strike? I mean, I watched you with Dr. Mori or Ujulawa last week, threatening that, okay, they're not calling off their strike, and the president should have just dismiss the Minister for Health and his counterparts in Labour and all of that. And I keep asking myself, what stops the president from just saying, because if I were in the president, should have just say, please call finance minister, can you just pay these guys? But how much exactly is involved? It's not to 120 billion naira. But then there is no money. Because the monies that Nigeria needs to fund critical social issues, social assets. I mean, if we had not learned any lesson, COVID last year should have taught us a lesson. You know that our first line of defense is our healthcare, and it's zero. I mean, the SGF had said when he visited a couple of those hospitals that I didn't know that the state of the healthcare facilities in Nigeria were this bad. But then even after he knew what has happened, you know, so there are risks and there are implications. I just told you some of the risks and some of the implications. So we're owing doctors. ASU, as of yesterday, one of the papers said ASU is threatening to go on strike again because federal government has been unable to meet the commitments that they entered into in writing because the funds are not available. The funds are being put to, you know, developing so-called infrastructure. Now, let's go back to the issue of, is the debt to the...
As you rightly pointed out, the infrastructure is needed.
Yeah.
It's also needed to kickstart and facilitate economic activity. We have been told that that inflation is on a runaway because, the cost of transportation is high. Before goods can get to the market, especially farm produce gets to the market, all of this, is making the cost of food items balloon, of course, add to it the security situation. And for those who have been, in recent times, been able to take the new trains from Ibadan to Lagos, from Abuja to Kaduna, and a few other places where the trains are now working, there's a sense of excitement, a sense that something new is, a sense of new possibilities, so to speak. And even though there are huge questions as to our ability to be able to pay back the loans used for that train, what the government keeps saying is that they're hoping to kickstart economic activities along these corridors and facilitate it, that they believe that this is going to have a long-term impact on the economy. Shouldn't we be doing all of it at the same time?
Mankwe, I beg to differ with you. Now, it is true that the debt to GDP ratios for OECD countries, you could actually call the OECD countries a club of debtors, because their debt to GDP ratio is almost all of them over 100%. Actually, Japan is the highest with 257% debt to GDP ratio. But what is the secret? The secret is that, Japan, you watch the Olympics, you saw Japan. Japan doesn't look like a country that needs infrastructure anymore. The Human Development Index in Japan is so way high. Per capita index is huge. Now, but what are the key buffers? For you to go into this debt binging on debt as a nation, you must have buffers, systemic buffers that immunes you, that ensures you against risk, that insulates you against risk, from the volatility of shocks in movement of, prices and all of that. Japan, like I said, is purely an export-driven economy. In this studio, most of these cameras will be stunned if they were not from Japan. Now, that is one. Number two, Japan has $1.3 trillion US raw cash in deposit. 1.3 trillion raw cash in deposit. Now, another critical factor is that Japan's tax to GDP ratio is 33%. The OECD average is 33%. The lowest is Mexico, maybe 16%. US is 24%. Now, if you disaggregate it further, of the 33% tax to GDP ratio, if you'll be stunned at the level of taxes that Japan generates. What is the tax to GDP ratio of Nigeria? We talked about this earlier on, 6.1. The tax debate on VAT and all of that, and everybody's going gaga about, VAT. That's not even the issue.
But we have capacity to even widen it. We have been told to widen the tax net, not even to increase the taxes, but to bring more people into the tax net.
I've been a major proponent of widening. That's what I'm saying. Now, that brings me back to the issue. If you have 100 million people living in extreme poverty, contributing next to nothing to this economy, what would a wise government do who is serious about, this government 2 years ago promised to lift 100 million people out of poverty. Can you tell me of any coherent strategic master plan to do that? None, to the best of my knowledge. Well, because we should be, we should be investing massively in SMEs. We should be investing massively in poverty eradication. That is the focus.
You say, that's, I don't know whether Professor Ken Ife would disagree with you, but, coherent master plan is your definition, is what you're looking for. We do know that there are plans towards lifting people out of poverty.
Okay, if there are plans, Mark,
just a moment.
Can you tell?
We've seen the social investment program, which was not existent before now. You might have issues with it, but these are the things that the federal government has come up with, at least at that level, and they're pretty novel.
Mark, a master plan to kickstarting this economy. We have a revenue crisis. That's the brouhaha. That's what all this brouhaha is all about.
Indeed.
So how do you do that? You have to grow the economy. And you do that based on tax revenues. Taxes. Now, how do you generate tax revenues? Through SMEs.
You want them to tax the SMEs that are struggling to survive?
No. Why don't you create additional SME clusters? so that you have more entrepreneurs. I mean, we had a brief discussion. You have entrepreneurs coming in as SMEs, and then you can get more taxes from them. That is how you grow. See, our tax to GDP is 6%, like I said. The IMF says the minimum threshold for an economy that wants to experience accelerated growth should be between 12 and 15%. Nigeria is way below that, 6.1%.
Okay, let me quickly bring Professor in here.
I do respect much of what he said, but if we are keeping the discussion around debt and debt sustainability, you wouldn't borrow money to pay salaries to sort out the issues around people going on strike. You couldn't borrow. The law doesn't allow you to borrow money to pay salaries. The reason why economies, advanced economies, are violating the benchmark of 60% debt to GDP and Japan going as well as 250 is simply because they have high infrastructure. In other words, their stock of infrastructure is so high. They are and people, investment, there are $9 trillion sovereign funds available looking for where to invest. They won't come to Nigeria that doesn't have the infrastructure. They will go to that same Japan where there are infrastructure, irrespective of their debt, and put their money there. So that's very important. You know, the infrastructure is what drives investors wanting to come into your domain. Then the other issue is about the tax. Now, Nigeria has on paper the lowest tax in Africa. But when you look at implicit tax, you find out that we are the highest. Now, what that means is there are studies that show that 60%...
What do you mean by
no, I'm coming to it
implicit
now.
tax?
I'm coming to it. There are studies that show that 60% of manufacturers actually say that 90% of the time they are providing their own power. So the cost of providing power is with them. The cost of building borehole and roads that connected is they are carrying the burden. So the implicit tax is all the whole burden, tax burden. We're the highest. So now, also, there are 90 million MSMEs in Africa. 42 million of them are from Nigeria. So while Nigerian population is 18% of Africa, GDP 18% of Africa, can you believe that half of the MSMEs in Africa are from Nigeria? Yet we have all these issues about infrastructure, positive access to finance, all of this. It shows you that entrepreneurship is a latent comparative advantage for Nigeria. So you can't tax them away. You can't kill them away. We are having the lowest VAT, 7.5%, half. The average VAT is 15%. Some are 17%. We are having the lowest, as I said, but you can't use tax to finish them off. One strategy is to widen the tax base, which we are talking about. It's good, so that many more people come into the tax net. The other one is to reduce the leakages. Do you know that we have more money going into tax exemptions and tax waivers and then leakages than the revenue that the government is collecting? So the government is focusing on those. And I've mentioned about PIA going to bring double the revenue. So there are things the government is looking at to increase and triple the revenue to be able to relate to rest this issue about the vulnerability or the potential for liquidity crisis. And then also we haven't looked at assets. Assets are where you should be looking. The whole narrative around Nigerian debt is, they can't afford to pay, they're illiquid, don't give them more money, but the computer says something different. That's why they're all coming to give you the money. But when Saudi Arabia needed $25 billion, they didn't go to IMF or World Bank. They said, tell me the value of my Aramco. And they valued it as over 1.5 trillion. So, if I have that kind of money, give me 5%. We went to the capital market. We should be doing that with thousands of companies owned by the government. So we have to establish national asset register, we have to value these companies, and then we have to put them on the market or get investors based on their value so that government's borrowing is now based on assets. And it's changing the narrative, it brings more liquidity into the system.
Let me take this conversation out to Lagos. Coyote.
Well, thank you, Mokwe. Very interesting conversation, and I know that this will always be a big debate. Prof, let me start with you, really, because for a lot of Nigerians, they judge based on, the trend of borrowings they have seen. I mean, just when they are done or about to be done talking about this loan request to the Senate, they see another one, $4 billion. I mean, they were just talking about one, was it July or June, and just in April as well. So clearly this, I don't know, will be an ongoing conversation. And there are questions as to when this enough will be enough, as it were? Where are we planning to get to? But let me just begin my own intervention by asking you, in terms of sustainability, because that's also another question. People look to the future and say, what will become our fate in 10 years, 20 years, when we're no more and our children have to be the one at the helms of affairs? Would we be able to pay back? Looking at the budget performance just from January to May, we made 1.84 trillion naira, right? And about 1.8 trillion, almost all of it was used to service debt. So in terms of sustainability, I mean, major revenue comes from oil. Oil output has dropped to, 1.2 million barrels per day. Yes, the price of crude oil is about $70, $73. But, I mean, you remember that we had 40, we were struggling with even below that. So in terms of sustainability, are you confident, really, that we can sustain this in 5 years or even more?
Well, I have to tell you that more debts are going to be coming. So that's not the end of it. But the question is the legality of this. The law says, well, actually, so far, it's captured in the... It was foreseen.
You have dealt, Prof, I think you have largely dealt with the legality.
And it was in the borrowing plan.
Prof, pardon me, I think you have largely dealt with the legality. In fact, you started on that note. But the sustainability, I've referenced crude oil production. We are doing 1.23, and you know what we actually benchmarked was way more than that. So sustainability now.
Okay, crude oil will only account for 50% of government revenue. And in the new dispensation, having sorted out the PIA, you've had the projection that from the FIRS that their revenue will double to over 10 trillion. So which means that, in fact, a lot more revenue is going to be coming. And with the kind of measures that I've outlined, where the government is now bringing a private infrastructure company, capitalizing it to 1 trillion, heading out for 15 trillion, that whole infrastructure that has been chastising all of us in terms of borrowing is going to be passed over to the private sector to manage. And that is where you're going to see a more efficiency scrutiny on these and better management and more confidence, because they'll be going to the market to support all that action. So we will be seeing the near end to this, but it's not yet. But don't forget again that one crucial issue is this. We are a nation at war in the 6 geopolitical zones. Many countries in the size of our conflict and security challenge would have been borrowing heavily to persecute the war. And they would have imposed 40% war tax on the citizens. But we're not doing any of those. So we're just managing within our means. We've already identified the culprit. The culprit is government revenue. And we are saying, what's government doing about it? And there are a series of measures that are kicked in where government is heading to 3 times their current revenue. And I can outline those. Some I have already mentioned, but there are many things that they are doing, because I happen to look into some of the committees where they are doing this. I can know what is going on, but there isn't enough time to talk about all of them.
I mean, it's good to have some informed opinion from you. It's quite good to have the informed opinion from you, and I think we'll lean on that a lot during the course of this conversation. But some of the assumptions you make, well, like I said, are assumptions. You've said that a lot of things will come on board, and then we'll triple our revenue, I mean, remember what happened last year. We had I would say, a great plan. Budget was passed quite early. COVID-19 hit, and we all know what came out of that. We're still trying to recover. So do we have a contingency plan? Because all these assumptions, who knows what will happen to the price of crude? Who knows how implementations will go? I mean, you understand this thing. So if we're basing our future on these assumptions, we don't pray for any disaster, but who knows what might happen to some of these projections we have made in terms of economic realities. Do we have a contingency plan? Again, can we sustain it?
I think I cannot write off the possibility that we can sustain the loan because of what I'm privy to. But having said that, nobody knew COVID was coming. But when COVID did come, there was a massive fiscal and monetary quantitative response. And that was why you had us jump out of it within a quarter. So you couldn't avoid borrowing in those circumstances. In fact, the minister said from the outset that her budget is going to be hit by 60%. But by the end of the 2020, we ended up spending more than what the budget was expected. So it's, we haven't seen the end yet. But there are more to it than we can share on this screen in the few minutes that we have available.
Okay, so Mr. Oluwade, I wonder what comes to mind when you hear Prof say, I mean, the borrowings will keep happening. I wonder how you interpret that. Earlier on, you said borrowing is not the problem, but hearing that this will keep happening. I know there are plans already for the 2022 budget and even how the borrowings will go. So the question is, when will it be too much, really?
Okay, the thing is this. We only keep focusing on the absolute quantity.
Prof, pardon me. This is for Mr. Oluwade.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kayode. On the sustainability question, it is not sustainable. And why do I say so? In the MTEF, medium-term expenditure framework, fiscal strategy paper that the finance ministry sent to the Senate for 2021 to 2024 budget projections, it was stated clearly, that Nigeria was going to use 47.8, roughly 48% of its revenues in the next 4 years, that is beginning 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, for debt service. So meaning, in layman terms, if you earn 100 naira, you're going to use 48 naira of the 100 naira to service debt. That is clearly unsustainable. And like I said, there are risks and there are implications of this risk. Now, one of the clear ones that we're seeing is that Nigeria is looking for money to meet essential services, critical services, education, healthcare, housing needs, and the list, goes on. Now, back to the issue of what is an asset and what do we need to borrow? Of course, I would not be surprised if more debt comes, because I think the National Assembly actually approved maybe a sum of 24 billion thereabouts, for the executive arm of government, and they're just taking them in piecemeal. That's what you see they keep applying for, in tranches. So I expect to see this coming. My worry, like I said, is what these monies are being put, into use. That's what gives me worry, because there are alternative financing models, for infrastructure. Prof knows, I know, and some of you know as well, that why don't you get some of these critical infrastructure that we're, getting these loans to build, why don't you concession them? Get private sector investments to fund these assets, for goodness sake. Because that way, the private sector comes with their expertise, with their know-how, with their funds to do these assets, and then it's on a long term, 20, 30 years concessional agreements, and then they're able to recover their investments and then transfer the assets back to the federal government. Meanwhile, the federal government has the revenues to do what the federal government is, what every government is in existence to do. By law, the role of the government is the welfare and security of its citizens. The question is that, is the government meeting the welfare and security of Nigerians? Because if you have 100 million people living in extreme poverty, you have 23% youth unemployment figures, and of the 33%, 42% of that are youth unemployment. Of course, you're going to have the disaster that we have currently of insecurity everywhere, and then if you have unemployment, so what are you going to do? A responsible government, in my mind, should develop MSMEs, fund aggressive funding for MSMEs. And I also agree with what Prof said about the PIA, brilliant legislation, and I think, but the trick or the deception is to think this is going to kick in 1 or 2 years. It's not going to happen. Even the implementation alone, the committee set up, they have almost 18 months to come on stream with the layout of how the PIA is going to work, the unbundling of the NNPC and all of that. So you don't expect anything meaningful coming out of the unbundling of the NNPC, the implementation of the PIA in the next 3 to 5 years. But you can actually, like I said, NNPC, I'm glad it's going to be privatized or commercialized eventually. So, monies will begin to come in. It's going to begin to turn out a profit, like the NLNG. I'm glad. So we can list the stocks of the NNPC on the stock exchange, and get revenues from that.
Well, the NNPC says that they have already started making profits.
No, that's subject to serious scrutiny. That's subject to debate.
Agreed, agreed. But that's what they have said. So maybe it does point to some potential which we cannot ignore them.
No, absolutely.
We also know that the implementation committee, I think, has 12 months to be able to lay out a plan in terms of how this is going to be implemented.
And then after that, begin the implementation of the process.
But you know, from all that you have laid out, uneasy indeed lies the head that wears the crown at this point. Not very many easy solutions. We have to thank you, gentlemen, for coming and sharing your thoughts on the program this morning. I do know that this conversation on our loan and where we are with our debt profile is an ongoing one, and we will be seeking your insights certainly in the coming days. Thank you so much for coming on the program this morning, Professor Ken Ife, who is an economist, and Mr. Wale Uluwade, who is the CEO of Growth Masters Consulting, speaking to us.
I can just drive, make it sell.
No, someone like this estate.
See them now, they go down, go inside.
He's a lie.
You see them.
If you go inside, make it even see us inside.
No, someone like this estate.
Now I get that. Force of request. Where is that?
Huh?
Many flats where in the year, so.
He's a lie. Oh, someone like.
You never finish. You see where
go down.
I better go down small for I want to video it too.
Go down.
They tell you say one thing.
Oh, someone like. They don't take money. He's a lie.
How long?
2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 1 bedroom with the whole size. What way not there.
He's a lie. And he go inside like that. Oh, that is why Oshomole don't respect anybody who.
They are collecting money in dollars. They collecting money now. And so they don't put something where they say their generation self. I mean, generation will come. Next 5 generations self, no go they poor.
No, Shomole get this. Only the land alone.
Only one of these buildings. If you hold only one of these buildings like this for this town, you not go ask for money again. Just one of this building. There's no one who is in less than even the one room no less less than $750, $800.
No, only one room that 800.
800 per month.
Per month. The other one's 1,000 plus.
Yeah.
See the amount.
It's a lie.
My governor. I carry on.
Oshomole don't finish us. God damn. No, Oshomole get this estate. Wow.
And that's what Nigerians will say.
Owó tí wọ́n fẹ́ gbà yìí wọ́n náà fi ṣe infrastructure tó oyè ọlọ́run àmọ́ àpẹẹrẹ tí wọ́n ń fa owó ìṣe là ń wò yìí àpẹẹrẹ tí wọ́n ń fa owó ìṣe ó làwa náà ń wò yìí ṣe ẹrẹ state bó ti tó ẹnìkan ṣoṣo ẹ wo bí wọ́n ti ń kówó pamọ́ ìlú kan dẹ̀ wà tó jẹ́ pé níbi tí ò sí corruption nílùú ìdè rárá àwọn tó ń ṣe bìrìdìṣe tó ń ṣe owó wọn á kó owó gegere báyìí sí orí tébù àwọn tó bá fẹ́ ṣẹ́wó aṣẹ́wó tó bá sì tásìkò àti jọ́sìn fọlọ́run wọ́n fẹ́ kírun ni wọ́n fẹ́ ṣe nǹkan kan ni wọ́n á kàn daṣọ bo owó náà wọ́n á kàn da náílọ̀nù bò wọ́n ń lọ kírun ni èèyàn kan ṣo báyìí ò ní dédé owó yẹn nígbà tí ò sí corruption tí ò sí pé ó lé ojú nígbà tí mo wo fídíò yẹn ara mi bù máa sọ pé ṣé ìlú kan rèé ṣá owó dẹ̀ á ga tó èèyàn báyìí lórí ìdúró wọ́n á sì filẹ̀ wọ́n á lọ kírun àwọn ẹgbẹ́ wọn tí wọ́n jọ ń pín owó tí wọ́n jọ ń ṣẹ́ owó wọn ò jẹ́ súnmọ́ bí tó wọ̀ wá mò ń bọ̀ ẹ jẹ́ àwọn orí.
Greetings from Hargeisa city in Somaliland, one of the safest places in the world you won't believe. You can walk with your cash in the streets, even your phone. Nobody will bother. Nobody will snatch it away from you. And I want to tell you something interesting. Here, there is what they call open forex. Money being exchanged in the streets, and not just small notes, piles and piles of them. Walk with me. So it's prayer time now.
It's the prayer time, and we will all go to the prayer
1 Kenyan shilling is equivalent to 7,000 Somaliland shilling. Interesting. Okay. Let me change this. Let me change this. This is Kenyan money. Wow. Interesting. We don't use it. Finished. Finished. But this is the new one. Yeah. This is the new one. Correct. Yes. This is 1 million Somaliland shillings, which is equal to $150. $150. Ah, $150. Okay. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, this is more. Yeah. Oh, different denominations.
The money on the streets is one of the signs of Somaliland, and we are famous about that thing. Every journalist from outside was surprised when he saw money without no guard, without no police. Even when the prayer time, they go along the money without no one touching it, and they go to the left it 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and they come back same as they go before.
Pesa, pesa, pesa. And you see, the owner of this cash, after serving me, has left for prayers. He'll be away for about 10 minutes and no one will dare touch the cash. It's all safe. And even me, this money I changed. I can walk around with it in the streets without any fear. No one can dare snatch anything from you in this country. That's how safe it is. See? Nobody here, they've gone for prayers. How are you?
Ẹ káàbọ̀ padà. Ṣé ẹ rí tó bó ti rí nu nílùú Nàìjíríà nílùú ìlú tẹ́ wò tán yìí tí kìí ṣe Nàìjíríà. Àwọn kan rèé o, àwọn kan la wò yìí, ìlú kan la wò yìí. Ṣùgbọ́n àwọn tiwa, àwọn ń ṣe owó kúmọkùmọ bó ti wù wọ́n ni. Àwọn ń ṣe owó tiwọn kúmọkùmọ bó ti wù wọ́n ni ìbẹ̀rẹ̀. Torí wípé àwọn ẹni Ọlọ́run kan wà tí wọ́n ti ń pe ṣíàmánù lókè lọ́hùn wípé bó bá mọ̀ pé ìlú yìí ti dàrú mọ́ ẹ lójú, ó wá buwọ́ lùwé kò fìwé lẹ̀ kó lò ṣe mọ́. Àgbà wòlíì kan tó ń jẹ́ Páítọ̀ àti àgbà àfáà kan tí a mọ̀ sí Ṣéhù, àwọn méjèèjì lọ́tọ̀ọ̀tọ̀ ni wọ́n máa panupọ̀ pé ṣíàmánù lókè lọ́hùn pé bọ́kọ̀rọ̀ kí wọ́n máa pa ọmọ Nàìjíríà lọ́tùn lósì yìí. Ó wá ṣe kúkú sọ pé kíní ọ̀hún ti dàrú mọ́ ọ lọ́wọ́ kó o fìwé lẹ̀ jẹ́jẹ́jẹ́. Mo fẹ́ ká gbọ́ ọ̀rọ̀ tí àwọn méjèèjì sọ lọ́tọ̀ọ̀tọ̀. Èní nìyẹn. Lẹ́ẹ̀kejì ni wípé ní ìgbà tí wọ́n sọ̀rọ̀ yìí, àwọn èèyàn wá padà lọ bá àgbà àfáà yẹn, wọ́n wá lọ bí léèrè, wọ́n interview ẹ̀ pé kí ló rí lọ́bẹ̀ o tó fi wà rú ọwọ́, kí ló rí ẹ̀rù tí ẹ̀ bá pẹ̀lú àwọn nǹkan tó sọ yìí. Ẹ jẹ́ ká wo kí ló ṣẹlẹ̀ ńbẹ̀, kí làwọn méjèèjì sọ. Mò ń padà bọ̀.
Is there nobody to take responsibility? I want to believe that we have all failed. I mean, I failed as an imam to teach you that life is sacred. You all failed as parents to teach your children that killing is bad. Our community leaders failed. Our politicians failed. Governors failed. Especially His Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, you have failed us. We have your video telling Nigerians that the military is capable. Our military is capable. It has all the requirements to tackle this insurgency. And if you are voted into power, you are going to make sure that happens in a short time. You have given 4 years an addition. Yet, people are dying like fowls. Killing is becoming norm in Nigeria under your watch, Mr. President. If there is no Nigerian to tell you, I will take the responsibility of telling you. And I will take the responsibility of the consequences. Because the life and properties of Nigerians is above all. Let me tell you, Mr. President, under your watch, bandits are taxing Nigerians. Is that the provision of the Constitution of Nigeria? Under the provision of Constitution of Nigeria, no one has the right to tax any Nigerian, except being authorized by the federal government or any other constituted authority. I'm not a learned person, but I'm not a layman. I'm telling you, Mr. President, you are to take responsibility. Because we have it in the Quran, we have it in Ahadith. Man wajada khairan falyahamidillah, wa man wajada ghayra dhalika fala yalumanna illa nafsa. Who do you want us to give responsibility? Do you want us to give the President of America, the President of Ghana, the President of the Chad? No. We have the right, constitutional right to ask you, Mr. President.
The country. Is it by force to rule? If you can't you resign? Is it by force? Things going out of control at various levels, and people are still sitting there until everybody dies? The time has come where they say enough is enough. John Maxwell said everything rises and falls on leadership. Yes, sir. We can't, it's not even time to blame who is the kidnappers or the bandits. Where are the people in authority that can make kidnap to end under 7 days if they want? Under 24 hours. There are kidnap cells everywhere in the bush. We have modern navigation technology to locate everywhere they are under 24 hours. Everywhere they are can be located by satellite. And then the people they kidnap pass through roadblocks. And people are sitting and priding themselves. I am chief this and chief that. Useless chief nothing. Stand up on your feet and let us pray. If we wait for authority, everybody may die in calamity. Jehovah, the supreme authority of the universe, has to arise in the defense of our nation. Second, Father, deliver our land from human disasters. We don't have natural disasters. You hear in some places earthquake, you hear this in Nigeria, we don't. The only disaster we have is leadership disaster. Disastrous leadership. If somebody is seated at an alcoholic joint, listen to this proverb. You see that he is a drunkard, or he is interested in drinking, or he doesn't mind drinking. If somebody is watching and blood is flowing, is either he is a killer, or he is a sponsor of killer, or he is excited at the killing. Very simple. Somebody is seated at an alcoholic joint and he said he claims that he's not drinking. It's either he's a drunkard quietly, secretly, or he has friends that are drunkard and is fraternizing with drunkards, or he is excited at the process of drinking. He likes watching drunkards drink. If somebody is watching, blood is flowing. He has the capacity to do something, he can't do anything. Is either he's a killer, or he collaborates with the killers, or he's excited at the process of the killing. That is the scenario of our nation. And the truth must be told. Father, we trust you.
We trust you.
For deliverance.
For deliverance.
For Nigeria.
For Nigeria.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
For Zamfara State.
For Zamfara State.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
For Niger State.
For Niger State.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
For Borno State.
For Borno State.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
For Yobe State.
For Yobe State.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
For Adamawa State.
For Adamawa State.
For Taraba State.
For Taraba State.
For Niger State.
For Niger State.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
Oh Lord, deliverance.
Oh Lord, deliverance.
For Benue State.
For Benue State.
For Enugu State.
For Enugu State.
For Ebonyi State.
For Ebonyi State.
For Ekiti State.
For Ekiti State.
For Ondo State.
For Ondo State.
For Oyo State.
For Oyo State.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
In Lagos.
In Lagos.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
For Osun State.
For Osun State.
For Ogun State.
For Ogun State.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
For Imo State.
For Imo State.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
For Abia State.
For Abia State.
Deliverance.
For deliverance.
For Anambra State.
For Anambra State.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
For Edo State.
For Edo State.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
For Delta State.
For Delta State.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
For River State.
For River State.
For Cross River
For
State.
Cross River
For
State.
Bayelsa
For
State.
Bayelsa State.
Father, we ask for deliverance.
For deliverance.
For Nasarawa
For
State. Deliverance.
Deliverance.
For Kogi State.
For Kogi State.
Deliverance. For Plateau State.
State.
Deliverance. For Kaduna State.
For Kaduna State.
For Katsina
For
State.
Katsina State.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
For Kano State.
For Kano State.
Deliverance. For Yobe State.
For Yobe State.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
For Jigawa State.
For Jigawa State.
Father, deliverance.
Father,
all over Nigeria.
All over
Sokoto State.
For Sokoto State.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
FCT. Kebbi State.
Kebbi State.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
For Kebbi State.
For Kebbi State.
Bauchi State.
Bauchi State.
Gombe State.
Gombe State.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
Father. For Taraba State.
For Taraba State.
Deliverance.
Deliverance.
For the whole country.
For the whole country.
Akwa Ibom State, in the name of Jesus. Say, Father, Nigeria shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. Deliverance. Oh Lord.
tó ẹ káàbọ̀ padà òótọ́ ọ̀rọ̀ Yorùbá ní ó máa ń dàbí ìsọkúsọ ni òtítọ́ ọ̀rọ̀ àkọ́kọ́ náà ó máa ń korò létí ọlọ́rọ̀ ẹlẹ́ẹ̀kejì ni pé bí ìsọkúsọ ló ṣe máa ń rí ìpè àwọn méjèèjì yìí ó jẹ́ ìpè tó mú mi lára tí ara ta mí tí ìbá sí pé n tó ń ṣẹlẹ̀ yìí ni ìjọ wo lẹ ti gbọ́ rí pọ́mọ Nàìjíríà tí wọ́n wà ní òyìnbó wọ́n lọ máàṣì ní United Nations náà mọ̀ pé àwọn ti gbàlejò lẹ́ṣẹ̀ rí tí wọ́n máàṣì ń bẹ̀ tí wọ́n ń sọ wípé enough is enough àníṣe ìtí Fúlàní pa wá tó ìtí máa fi ṣe lọ lónìí lágbára Ọlọ́run ó náà ní iṣẹ́ tí olóyè Sunday Igboho jẹ tó rán sí gbogbo ẹ̀dá tó rán sí gbogbo ilẹ̀ Yorùbá àti pé ìròyìn ayọ̀ tí mo máa fi fún wa lọ́wọ́lọ́wọ́ bí mo ti ń bá yín sọ̀rọ̀ yìí olóyè Sunday Igboho ní tí wọ́n ń pè ní freedom ó ti bá kì í ṣe pé wọ́n ti filẹ̀ o àmọ́ kò yàtọ̀ sí pé wọ́n filẹ̀ náà ní ibi tó wà níbẹ̀lẹ̀ torí wípé àhámọ́ tí wọ́n lọ fi sí tẹ́lẹ̀tẹ́lẹ̀ tí ò láǹfààní láti rí gbára o ìyẹn ti kú òǹbẹ ẹlẹ́ẹ̀kejì ni pé níbi tí wọ́n tún fún láyè dé ẹ̀rọ ìbánisọ̀rọ̀ tá a mọ̀ sí asset wọ́n ti mú fólóyè Sunday Igboho pé kó máa fi pé gbogbo àwọn tó bá wọn káàkiri eléyìí ló wá mú pé ìkan nínú àwọn sọ̀rọ̀sọ̀rọ̀ wípé bá mi jíṣẹ́ o fún gbogbo ọmọ Yorùbá wípé agbẹjọ́rò mi Aliu mo ti dáríjì o kí gbogbo ọmọ Yorùbá náà sì dáríjì ìkan nínú àwọn sọ̀rọ̀sọ̀rọ̀ tí olóyè Sunday Igboho bá sọ̀rọ̀ tó fi fóònù ìpè handset tí wọ́n fún tó fi bá sọ̀rọ̀ mo wá fẹ́ ká gbọ́ nǹkan tí iṣẹ́ tí olóyè Sunday Igboho náà rán láti ẹnu sọ̀rọ̀sọ̀rọ̀ náà mò ń bọ̀.
ẹ kú dédé àsìkò yìí gbogbo èèyàn ọmọ kóòtù òjíire mo kí ẹ̀yin ọmọ aládé mo kí gbogbo èèyàn ọmọ olóyè mo kí oyún inú mo kí ọ̀tọ̀kùn ìlú bẹ́ẹ̀ ni mo kí àṣẹ ẹ̀dí mo kí ẹ̀yin bàbá bàbá mo kí ẹ̀yin ẹ̀gbọ́n mi wíwá mi lénìí àṣẹ látọwọ́ bàbá wa Chief Olóyè Adéyẹmọ Sunday Igboho ṣá wọ́n ṣe pè mí lẹ́nìí kò tí ì tó bí ìṣẹ́jú 5 sí 10 wọ́n ní kí n sọ fún yín pé gbogbo ẹ̀yin ọmọ kóòtù òjire ẹ dáríjì lọ́ọ̀yà Sàlámì lọ́ọ̀yà tó ń tẹ́kì kéèsì bàbá wa Ìgbòho wọ́n ní ká dáríjì o wọ́n ní ká dáríjì lọ́ọ̀yà yẹn wọ́n ní ká dáríjì ẹ jọ̀ọ́ gbogbo ẹ̀yin ọmọ kóòtù òjire ẹ dáríjì wọ́n ní tá a bá jẹ̀kọ́ a máa ń dáríjì ewé èmi náà ti dáríjì yẹn torí èmi tiẹ̀ ti tún ní nǹkan tí mo páìlì fún lọ́la wàláì a tún fẹ́ sọ òkú ọ̀rọ̀ ńlá nítorí pé Yorùbá ló ń sọ lẹ́nu jáde inú wa dẹ̀ dùn nítorí pé a fọkàn tán ẹni ó ti wá fẹ́ jẹ́ ká máa ṣe báyìí àmọ́ tí ò bá rí bẹ́ẹ̀ gẹ́gẹ́ bí nǹkan tó ṣe bàbá wa olóyè Sunday Igboho ó ní gbogbo ẹ̀yin ọmọ kóòtù òjíire gbogbo ẹ̀yin freedom fighter gbogbo ẹ̀yin sọ̀rọ̀sọ̀rọ̀ gbogbo ẹ̀yin pèdèpèdè tẹ́ ẹ ti pèdè lórí ọ̀rọ̀ lọ́ọ̀yà Sàlámì pẹ̀lú nǹkan tó dánwò wọ́n ní kẹ́ jọ̀ọ́ wọ́n ní kẹ́ foríjìn wọ́n ní ẹ foríjìn nítorí pé ó nídìí wa àwa náà nídìí ẹ̀ so a gbọ́dọ̀ ṣiṣẹ́ yìí kájọ ṣiṣẹ́ bí ọwọ́ ṣe ń rí kí ọwọ́ lè sowọ́ pọ̀ mọ́ra wọn lọ́ọ̀yà Sàlámì ibi tẹ́ ẹ bá wà kẹ́yìn náà fetí gbọ́ olóyè Sunday Igboho ó kọjá ẹni àrífín òòṣà kan táwọn ọmọ kóòtù òjìrè ń bọ lọ́wọ́ yìí ni gbogbo ẹnu mo fi sọ òòṣà kan tá à ń bọ nílẹ̀ Yorùbá òun lẹ́yìn lọ pé bàbá mi ẹ má jẹ́ tún sọ̀rọ̀ torí nǹkan kan wà tó ń gbé mi inú tẹ́lẹ̀ bọ́ òòṣà gbọ́dọ̀ sọ̀rọ̀ kí n tún ní báwọn tiẹ̀ ṣe jẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ náà ni àpọ́nlé òsínbọ́fà tí ò só lórí tí n bá sọ̀rọ̀ òṣó sì mú pé àbá ó ti dáṣẹ́ akíkanjú ọkùnrin ogun ni Sunday Igboho kò ń ṣe ẹni tó ń ríyàn fín ó dẹ̀ gba ó kọ ìwọ̀sí ó dẹ̀ tún gba ìwọ̀sí mọ́ra jù nítorí ẹni tí agbójúlé ni ẹni tí ọmọ Yorùbá dúró dè ni wọ́n ní ó pè mí ó ní ká dáríjì lọ́ọ̀yà Sàlámì àti dáríjì yìí o ẹ wá ṣe ń tá a fẹ́ o ẹ ṣe ń tá a fẹ́ nítorí pé Ìgbòho ti kọjá ẹni téèyàn rí fín nílùú Kútọ́nù nítorí ìlú yín tó jẹ́ nì òṣàlù tiwa ní Nàìjíríà òun lẹ́yìn fẹ́ máa bá sọ̀rọ̀ báyìí ìbọn lọ́ọ̀yà Sàlámì àti dáríjì ẹ̀ nítorí Ìgbòho ó ní ká dáríjì torí mi mo ṣe láàfin yẹn mo dẹ̀ rí pé ó rìn jìnnà àti dáríjì ẹ̀ àmọ́ wá ṣe ẹ̀tọ́ omi ẹ̀tọ́ tí mo bèrè ẹ̀tọ́ yẹn kíní yẹn gangan ṣe kíní yẹn fún wa nǹkan tá a fẹ́ kíní yẹn gangan ṣe fún wa tó bá ti ṣe kíní yẹn wà á tún rí pé ìwọ gan ṣe tún ní kíní ráǹkì ẹ mo ti kọ́kọ́ já ráǹkì ẹ wálẹ̀ tẹ́lẹ̀ bọ̀tí sìn a máa fi ráǹkì sí gan ṣe kíní yẹn ẹ̀tọ́ yẹn gangan ṣe adúpẹ́ olóògbó lọ́wọ́ Nàìjíríà kankan olóògbó lọ́wọ́ ìjọba tó o bá gbowó lọ́wọ́ ìjọba tó o gbowó lọ́wọ́ Nàìjíríà ṣe kíní yẹn fún wa kíní yẹn gangan ni kò ṣe on the 14-15 mega rally ní New York on the 31st of September sí on the 1st of October mega rally ní Washington DC ẹ sáré ẹ tiraka gbogbo ẹ̀yin ọmọ kóòtù òjíire ẹ má sùn ẹ jẹ́ ká ṣe kíní nǹkan mọ ibi tó ti ń ta wá lára ẹ fi àwọn ará Nàìjíríà tí ò mọ nǹkan kan tó ń ṣe pátí kiri tó ń jó kiri ẹ fi wọ́n lẹ̀ ẹ jẹ́ ká wá ṣe ọjọ́ ọ̀la tiwa ni kò ń ṣe tiwa ọjọ́ ọ̀la àwọn ọmọ wa míì òun là ń ṣiṣẹ́ fún lọ́ọ̀yà Sàlámì àti dáríjì ẹ̀ gbogbo ọmọ kóòtù òjíire ti dáríjì lọ́ọ̀yà Sàlámì ọmọ Kútọ́nù Yorùbá èdè abínibí ló ń sọ àti dáríjì ẹ̀ o ire owó ire ọmọ a máa jẹ́ tiẹ̀ gbogbo ẹni tẹ́ wá ti wá fẹnu àtẹ́ tẹ́ ẹ fi ṣe pè fún lọ́ọ̀yà Sàlámì Ìgbòho òṣàníkẹ́ tó epo lá kẹ́ ẹ ṣàdúrà fún o wọ́n ní ẹ wúre fún a ní ìdí ẹ̀ òun náà ní ìdí wa ire owó ire ọmọ àìkúbálẹ̀ ọ̀rọ̀ bàbá mi Ìgbòho láyọ̀ ló máa jáde Lady K láyọ̀ ló máa jáde ọmọ Yorùbá ò dúró bẹ́ẹ̀ là ń ṣiṣẹ́ Lady K àti brọ́dà wa kejì à ń ṣiṣẹ́ takuntakun iṣẹ́ náà Ọlọ́run á dẹ̀ fún wa ṣe ó dàbọ̀ ó tún dì.
tó olóyè Sunday Igboho iṣẹ́ tí wọ́n rán ààrẹ almoruf sí gbogbo ọmọ Yorùbá òun náà láti gbọ́ yìí ó níyànṣe ọlọ́kàṣe ò gbogbo ẹ̀yin tí ẹ bá mi wo tèmi gbogbo yín náà ni mo dúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ ẹ ṣe wo ibi tí wọ́n kọ subscribe sí kẹ́ ẹ bá mi tẹ̀ kẹ́ ẹ jẹ́ ká kọ́mọ lùbọ́ kẹ́yìn náà di shareholder nínú Bàbá Gbàgede Ìmọ̀ TV ẹ jẹ́ ká jọ kọ́mọ lùbọ́ ẹ bá mi tẹ̀bi tán sọ subscribe sí bákan náà ni pé ìyẹn tẹ́ ẹ bá tí ì tẹ́tẹ́lẹ̀ o bákan náà ni pé ẹ wo ibi tí aago wà, àmì aago yẹn òun náà ń pè ní notification bell, ẹ kílìkì lórí ẹ̀. Tẹ́ bá ti kílìkì lórí ẹ̀, dájúdájú ẹ̀yin gbogbo fídíò tí n bá ti ṣe síta ẹ máa rí kedere, wọ́n máa gbé wá fún yín. Tó oníyanṣẹ́ ọlọ́kàṣe ò gbogbo ẹ̀yin tẹ́ bá mi wo tèmi náà, gbogbo yín ni mo dúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ ẹ̀. Èmi ọmọ yín náà ni o, bàbá gbàgede ìmọ̀ náà ni mò ń fàsìkò sọ fún wa pé láyọ̀.